A seismic moment for Iran and the Middle East, with deep uncertainty about what comes next. Tonight, another wave of bombings by the U.S. in Israel as Iran vows vengeance for the killing of the country's supreme leader. The U.S. reports its first casualties and warns it could be just the beginning.
Sadly, there will likely be more.
The violence rippling beyond the Middle East, with implications for Canada, too.
This is like a heart attack to the oil markets and potentially to the global economy.
For some, the attack on the regime long overdue. For others, a reckless gamble with no clear end game.
From CBC News, this is The National with Ian Hannamansing.
Barely 48 hours since it began, the war launched by the U.S. and Israel against Iran is reshaping the Middle East, sending shockwaves around the globe. The skies of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem streaked with interceptors, some missiles getting through, the deadliest strike so far destroying a synagogue. While the U.S. and Israel sent more waves of punishing strikes into Iran, the regime already reeling from the death of its supreme leader. Donald Trump, celebrating the killings, said combat operations will continue in full force. The war is already more widespread than anything the region has seen in years. The U.S. and Israel say they've struck more than 1,000 targets across Iran retaliating by firing into Israel, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates, the toll mounting, including more than 200 in Iran, at least 9 in Israel, and 3 U.S. service members dead. The war is still expanding. Tonight, Israel said it was launching attacks on Hezbollah in Lebanon after the militant group fired into Israel, retaliation for the death of Iran's leader. Margaret Evans begins our coverage now on a region that may be spinning violently out of control.
And so begins 40 days of mourning for a man who had ruled Iran for nearly 40 years. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei holding the country in a grip so tight few could imagine it being ripped from his grasp. This is what's left of his compound in Tehran after Israel bombed it, killing him and several military advisors, leaving his supporters to mourn him and regime members still standing to manage both a war and a succession. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian called Khamenei a great martyr. We must join hands and thwart our enemies, he says. On Sunday, an Iranian missile slipped through Israel's defenses, hitting a synagogue and killing at least 9 people. Iran has also been targeting U.S. military bases in neighboring countries, also hitting some civilian areas. Smoke rising above the United Arab Emirates and Qatar. Buildings in Bahrain scarred by strikes. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu suggests there will be no quick end to the war. Our forces are now striking in the heart of Tehran with growing intensity, he says, and this will only increase. Tehran was again under heavy fire. The Basij militia headquarters a target, along with Iranian state television. An earlier strike in southern Iran reportedly hit a school, killing dozens of children. They are difficult days for regime supporters and opponents alike. But for some Iranians who have long sought the overthrow of a regime feared for its cruelty and oppression, there was room for a bit of celebration on hearing news of Khamenei's demise, some even daring to do it in public, albeit under cover of night.
Ian, that is because while the Ayatollah may no longer be around, the regime that he spent decades building up all around him still is.
And Margaret, what do we know about the plan to replace him?
For now, they've created a three-man interim council, which includes the president, and it's supposed to take care of affairs like the succession. It is normally, or you would expect that to be quite an elaborate affair. Not so this time, but we do understand that Ali Khamenei did leave behind a short list of sorts for his preferred candidates. Some people think that might speed the process up, but it's really difficult to think how they might actually proceed with this, given all the bombing that's going on, given that everything that's going on at this stage.
Margaret Evans reporting from Amman, Jordan. Crystal Gamansing is in Jerusalem tonight. And Crystal, how are people responding to these attacks?
And living with danger is nothing new here, but it is starting to wear thin. Throughout the day, your mobile phone will startle you with a message warning you to get to a shelter. That's in addition to the outdoor sirens that will blare. It can often feel like you are living in a constant alert, waiting for a missile strike. People are asking how long they'll need to keep a to-go bag at their door, how many times they'll have to wake up their children in the middle of the night in order to scoop them up and rush them to a shelter. A 102-year-old man died today. He fell going down the stairs trying to get to his shelter.
And that rising death toll in Israel underscoring the risk and sacrifice of this war.
There were more missile strikes tonight here and more damage. There seems to be an attempt to try to address low morale. There have been a number of strikes, deadly strikes, missiles from Iran that have managed to get through Israel's multi-layered air defense systems. Israel's President Isaac Herzog tried to boost their morale, saying that this is a historic time to change the trajectory of the Middle East towards peace. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu acknowledged that these are challenging days, but he went with a familiar theme, saying that these challenging days are all about ensuring Israel's existence.
Crystal, you've been witnessing these strikes come in. What does that feel like?
Yeah, given the fact that Israelis have been living with conflict for so incredibly long, there is a battle to try to deal with complacency. When you get that mobile alert, when you get the all clear, it also comes with a message that says, do not ignore these messages, stay close to shelters. And I can tell you that when those interceptors go off, when there is an alert that has come in, and when those explosions happen close to you like they did today, they do make your heart race, and you really don't want to ignore any of those warning messages.
Crystal Gamansing in Jerusalem tonight. In the United States, as Donald Trump lauds this mission and his own leadership, he's also warning more American casualties are likely. 3 U.S. service members have already been killed. Paul Hunter now with Trump's message tonight to Iranian citizens and those in power.
As the U.S. assault on Iran continues, word from the U.S. president there's much more to come.
Combat operations continue at this time in full force, and they will continue until all of our objectives are achieved. We have very strong objectives.
In this new video, Trump urging Iranian authorities
to lay down your arms and receive full immunity or face certain death. It will be certain death. Won't be pretty.
Trump signaling separately that Iran's new leadership now wants to talk, adding he'll listen, but gave no other details. Say Trump backers, the result of all of this will be a deeply diminished Iran.
Iran in the future will no longer be the largest state sponsor of terrorism. They cannot rain terror on the region. They cannot commit mass murder. That's the goal of this operation. Again, the mothership of terrorism is sinking. The captain is dead. Well done, President Trump.
But even as Trump underlined what he described as overwhelming U.S. force, he acknowledged those first U.S. troops to have been killed in this operation.
And sadly, there will likely be more. Before it ends, that's the way it is. Likely be more.
Democrats raising another matter. Where does this go from here?
We are now in a gamble. And we're in a situation in which the president has not clearly articulated what is his real goal and how will he achieve it. So there's a lot of ambiguity, I think, even within the administration of what comes next.
Trump, who had long pledged never to start a war, is also finding opposition within his own Republican Party. Senator Rand Paul slamming it, in his words, as yet another preemptive war in the Middle East. Former Republican lawmaker and one-time major supporter of Trump, Marjorie Taylor Greene, called Trump's attacks the worst betrayal of all time.
I call upon all Iranian patriots who
Trump
yearn for
ending his
freedom.
video with a message to the Iranian people. Seize the moment, he said. Take back your country.
The rest will be up to you, but we'll be there to help.
The concern by some in this country, Ian, is that this is day 2 of what will turn out to be another one of those so-called endless wars for the U.S. For the record, Donald Trump is suggesting a timeline of roughly 4 weeks.
So another issue for some, Paul, is that the U.S. Congress did not authorize the attacks, nor was it fully informed about them. So where do things stand with that?
Yeah, some of that should change Tuesday, Ian, with a set of briefings on Capitol Hill. Lawmakers will hear from the Secretary of State, Secretary of War, the head of the CIA, and the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Safe to say there will be many questions for all, Ian.
Paul Hunter in Washington. Many people inside Iran are now trying to get out, and with that airspace closed, it means crossing at land borders. One of those is the Kapakoi crossing into Turkey, where travelers today reported long lines and delays. Briar Stewart is in nearby Van tonight, but spent much of the day speaking to those who did manage to get across. And Briar, what have they been telling you?
Yeah, Ian, we saw people coming in and out of Iran. Some were making the trip back home after being out abroad when the airspace closed. Others were leaving Iran because of the security situation. Obviously, there are the airstrikes, but there's also the great uncertainty about what will come next now that Iran's supreme leader has been killed. Some people are optimistic and hope that this is the beginning of a new era. Others are skeptical and doubt very much will change. Do you think this is the beginning of a new Iran?
I hope we have new life in Iran.
Probably things will keep up as they were before. So I think the leadership will just change. And then I don't think that there will be any regime change or whatsoever as expected by some.
Now it remains extremely difficult to reach people inside Iran because of widespread internet outages.
And Briar, there are reports that Iranian citizens have been prevented from leaving.
Yeah, Ian, we met a couple of people at the border who told us that they saw dozens of Iranians waiting to be allowed to leave when others, including those holding Turkish passports, were allowed to go. It's not exactly clear what's going on, but some suggested it was because computer systems were down. We spoke with one family, and it included a father, a mother, and a boy, and they were all trying to cross together. And the father told us that his wife was held back, and he suggested it was because she's an Iranian citizen and he isn't. Well, the father and the boy crossed into Turkey, and they were now waiting for her to join them here.
Briar Stewart in Van, Turkey tonight. Prime Minister Mark Carney has announced his support for the strikes on Iran, but says Canada will play no direct role in the war. David Thurton has more on what Canada's saying.
Mark Carney, it's wonderful to be able to speak with you again.
On the sidelines of a trade mission to India, Mark Carney faced questions about the attacks on Iran.
We have not been party to the military buildup to this or the military planning of this, so it is not envisioned that we would be part of it moving forward.
As many as 18 Canadian Forces members were attached to the U.S. bases that carried out the strikes. In a statement, the Department of National Defense said it had no involvement in the United States Operation Epic Fury, but the department did not address the Canadians assigned in the region as exchange officers, or whether the federal government told them to step back from their exchange duties in Qatar and Bahrain.
Canada's position on the developments in the Middle East remains clear.
Carney also announced he backs Donald Trump's actions.
Canada supports the United States acting to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon and to prevent its regime from further threatening international peace and security.
In 2012, Canada severed diplomatic ties with Iran, calling it the world's most significant threat to global peace and security.
I think we have to be very vigilant as this regime crumbles.
Some worry Canada might become a refuge for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps.
It cannot become the place that Iranian regime officials escape to. If they come here, they have to, face justice under international law.
Right now, the federal government is focused on helping Canadians on the ground, urging citizens in Iran to shelter in place and those in the wider region to evacuate as soon as it's safe to do so. David Thornton, CBC News, Ottawa.
Tonight, large numbers of Iranian Canadians are celebrating the strikes that they hope will lead to regime change. Jennifer Yoon shows us their jubilant celebrations and others who call this an unjust war.
The moment when these Iranian Canadians found out Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, was killed.
Thanks God, thanks Netanyahu, thanks Trump, he's dead. He's dead.
Tens of thousands in Canada celebrating the strikes by American and Israeli forces against the Islamic Republic.
Nobody wants war in their own home. If Iranian people are asking for war, that means we had hit rock bottom.
Some say they were forced to flee Iran because of their political beliefs, and they fear for those who remain.
My whole family are back home. My friends, all of my friends are back home.
Others say the Iranian regime killed their loved ones in the recent brutal crackdown against protesters.
Those people sacrificed their life and they knew that their sacrifice was needed.
Similar stories from across Canada this weekend.
My family managed to call me and they were dancing.
It's not normal, I know. We are thousands of miles away from Iran and we are celebrating a war that is happening in our country. But this is the only way we can get rid of this murderous Islamic Republic regime.
The RCMP says it's increased security around some embassies and in affected communities, as some anti-regime activists brace for blowback. This gym near Toronto, used for meetings, was shot at overnight at least 17 times. The activist who owns the business thinks he knows why.
We have one enemy, and it's Islamic Republic.
Others are speaking out against the U.S. and Israel, calling their attacks a violation of international law.
The United States is wiping their feet with international law.
But many Iranian Canadians say they're feeling real hope. Some for the first time in over 40 years that the regime will fall for good. Jennifer Yoon, CBC News, Toronto.
The violence is having ripple effects beyond the region. In Pakistan, at least 23 people are dead after protests over the killing of Iran's supreme leader turned violent. Protesters and police clashed at U.S. consulates across the country, including Karachi, where at least 9 people were killed after smashing windows and reportedly breaching the compound's outer security wall. Riot police were also deployed to the consulate in Lahore as hundreds vented their anger. The war sent a shock through oil markets. Today alone, overseas markets seeing prices surge about 10%, with concerns it could go higher. Peter Cowan shows us why and how the impact will be felt widely, including here in Canada.
One of the world's most vital shipping lanes for oil and gas has become a dangerous place. This ship on fire off the coast of Oman.
This is like a heart attack to the oil markets and potentially to the global economy.
Every day, about 20 million barrels of oil go through the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow stretch of water between Iran and Oman. It's not officially closed, but Iran is warning ships not to enter, so companies are keeping dozens of tankers parked on both sides of the strait.
You are taking away close to 20% of the oil supply just overnight. This has never happened. So there is no historical precedence to that.
Iran has threatened to close the strait before, but it's never happened. Even during the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, the American military kept oil moving.
If we're talking hours or days, this is mostly a blip and the market get over it. Weeks or months, this is obviously a much more serious factor, and we would easily see prices skyrocket back into the triple digits.
Higher global oil prices are good for Canadian oil producers and oil-producing provinces that collect royalties. Insecurity may also make Canadian oil more in demand.
Canada benefits as an energy security brand when the world is energy insecure.
But as crude oil prices go up, gasoline prices at the pump are expected to follow.
We could see a several cent a liter increase starting Monday morning. And by later in the week, we could see a 5 to 7 cent a liter increase. Obviously, it's a volatile situation.
The longer this conflict goes on, the more pressure there will be on the U.S. and its allies to get oil and gas moving again through the strait. But if Iran feels trapped and starts targeting oil production facilities or putting explosive mines in the water, experts warn high oil prices could be more than just a temporary blip. Peter Cowan, CBC News, Montreal.
Another story we're following tonight. Western Canada is dealing with a deadly avalanche streak, and a Calgary teenager is the latest victim.
It's not time to push into complex terrain. It's time to stay conservative.
Experts weigh in on how to stay safe on the slopes. The world is bracing for what comes next after the death of Iran's supreme leader.
We do not have a single example of air power alone bombing a regime into submission.
Is the tipping point further off than Washington thinks? We're back in 2. The FBI says it's looking into a possible terrorism link after an overnight mass shooting in Austin, Texas. 3 people were killed and 14 injured when a gunman opened fire outside a bar in the city's busy entertainment district. He was shot and killed by police. Reports suggest the suspect was wearing an Iranian flag on his shirt and a sweatshirt that said, "Property of Allah." In the last 2 weeks, 5 people have been killed in avalanches in Western Canada, including 2 this weekend. Avalanche Canada says 1 person died after snowmobilers triggered an avalanche at the Kootenay Pass on Saturday in southern BC, and a teenager was killed at a ski hill just west of Calgary in Kananaskis country. Sam Sampson has been looking into this. And Sam, tell us first of all about these deaths.
Yeah, we are still learning more about that death in BC. And so when it comes to those snowmobilers, Avalanche Canada says, yes, they did trigger that avalanche in southern BC. Now, other riders actually had to dig them out, but 1 person did die. And then on Friday, a 15-year-old from Calgary was the one who died at that ski hill west of the city. RCMP say 2 skiers actually were swept up in that avalanche. 1 was able to dig themselves out, but the other, the teenager, was brought to hospital and died. Now, police and the ski hill continue to investigate. And this is not in the backcountry, by the way. Many avalanches are, but Avalanche Canada says these incidents at ski hills do happen, but usually they're controlled incidents.
And how high is the avalanche risk right now?
Yeah, there's still notable risk in BC's interior and along the Rockies in general. In total, there have been 6 avalanche deaths since December 30th. On average, 11 people die every year from these disasters. But still, with widespread layers of weak snow, Avalanche Canada is asking Canadians to stay away from more challenging terrain.
We call it kind of powder fever, where you get that blue sky, nice fresh snow, and fair enough, everyone wants to get out and enjoy it, but we're encouraging people to recognize it's not time yet. It's not time to push into complex terrain. It's time to stay conservative.
Now, if you do choose to go to the mountains, experts suggest taking an avalanche education course and staying cautious because they say current conditions can fool even the most experienced on the slopes.
Sam Sampson in Edmonton tonight. Canada's Conservative Party is calling on Ottawa to hold an independent public inquiry into the Tumbler Ridge tragedy.
An independent inquiry will look into things like mental health, access to firearms, and the protection of victims' families.
Public safety critic Frank Caputo was joined in his call by the Conservative MP for Tumbler Ridge. They say a full independent inquiry under Canada's Inquiries Act would examine how the mass shooting happened and come up with recommendations to prevent a similar tragedy. 8 people were killed in February when a shooter opened fire in a school and a home in the small BC Rockies town. As we've mentioned, Mark Carney is in New Delhi tonight in advance of a Monday meeting with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. It's part of an ongoing trade and diplomatic reset with the world's most populous country as Canada looks to grow economic ties outside of the United States. Saturday night, Carney told a business crowd in Mumbai he thinks Canada and India are on track to reach a free trade deal by year's end. There's uncertainty tonight about the future of Iran as Donald Trump presses for regime change.
Americans will never have to face a radical, bloodthirsty terrorist regime armed with nuclear weapons and lots of threats.
A look at what could happen next. Iranian Canadians share their hope for a new future, but still worry about the safety of their loved ones.
We are worried that it gets worse than this.
Those mixed emotions. Next. Tehran, now the epicenter of a war with the U.S. Its supreme leader killed. Donald Trump calling for an uprising.
Be brave, be bold, be heroic, and take back your country.
But in the Iranian capital, signs of resistance. And across the broader region, Iran is striking back. Providing proof regime change, what the U.S. president is loudly calling for, is far from certain.
We do not have a single example of air power alone bombing a regime into submission.
So what might it take for the U.S. to truly achieve its stated goal? Eli Glasner breaks down whether this war, as it's being fought, can really alter Iran's path forward.
As U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran continue, a central question remains. Can you bomb a country into regime change?
No, it's fantasy.
No, you cannot bomb a country into regime change. We've never seen it.
It's an open question.
There's no doubt the opening salvo was remarkably successful, killing Iran's supreme leader as well as numerous top military commanders, although much of the regime remains with many replacements ready. As the battle continues, this is a war waged in the air, with bombs and drones and missile strikes, while Trump encourages Iranians to rise up.
When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take.
On the ground, they're on their own. Nader Hashemi teaches Middle East politics at Georgetown University. He says regime change was never really the goal.
The goal, the real goal of the American and Israeli operation is not regime change, but it's actually state collapse. It's to try and break the back of the Iranian state, to make it much weaker.
He says even with the death of the supreme leader, the regime is quite resilient, in part because the military has a vested interest.
The Islamic Republic of Iran did roughly 20 years ago to ensure its survivability. It turned over large parts of the economy to the Revolutionary Guard and their family and friends and a huge network, so that precisely when a moment like this might arrive, those Guard commanders and officers have a lot more to lose.
While the campaign continues,
it's up to Iran to pick your leader. It's not my job. It's not President Trump's job. We're not going to occupy the country.
It has limits. Kelly Grieco looks at U.S. foreign policy at the Stimson Center.
If we actually look at the historical record, we do not have a single example of air power alone bombing a regime into submission.
She says there's what air campaigns can do.
It can go after ballistic missile launchers. It can degrade command and control facilities.
And what they can't.
Air power cannot change politics. It cannot reshape nations.
After the U.S. military invasion of Venezuela, she fears Trump is learning the wrong lessons.
That you can use air power on the cheap to achieve really lofty goals. And what we've been seeing over time is that the goals are getting more expansive.
She points to the bombing of Libya in 2011, when the U.S. coalition, including Canada, attacked Muammar Gaddafi's forces.
We've taken out Libya's air defenses. Gaddafi's forces are no longer advancing across Libya.
This is something that you will hear a lot from Africa, actually. When they look back at the Libya operation in 2011, right, the risks to Western air forces were very small, but it destabilized really the entire continent, particularly the countries around Libya, but its effects spread, including in just the dispersal of military capabilities, Libyan stockpiles that got in the hands of different actors and spread.
But Behnam Ben Taleblu, the senior director of the Iran program at a Washington think tank, has a different vision for Iran.
Go big or go home. If you're not going to do this right, it may not be worth doing at all.
a much longer air campaign to shatter Iran's security state.
To engaging political targeting, cutting the chain of command and control, and then ultimately drilling down finally against Iran's security forces, making it safer for Iranian protesters to be able to take to the streets en masse.
For that to happen, Hashemi would like to see sanctions, not bombs, that target Iran's elite. What would really need to be in place for the people that we saw out in the streets in December to actually fulfill their vision of the country?
What you basically need is you have to have ripe, social, political, and economic conditions, in Iran, so people can organize and fight this authoritarian regime. But sanctions that don't affect the average citizen allow the Iranian economy and the average citizen to be able to breathe, so that people don't have to worry about day-to-day needs of putting food on the table, and they can start to think about organizing and fighting against this authoritarian regime.
Next, let's bring in Arif Lalani, a former Canadian ambassador to Jordan, Iraq, the UAE, and Afghanistan. He's currently a senior advisor for geopolitical advisory at Strategy Corp, and he's in Lisbon this evening. And Arif, let's start with Iran's leadership. The foreign minister now says Iran could elect a new supreme leader within 1 or 2 days. What are the implications of that?
Well, I guess it remains to be seen who they choose and also whether they get it done in the next 2 or 3 days. I think what you're seeing is the leadership that is surviving and able to function, trying to move forward in a coherent and strong way. So from what I see, most of the choices for the new supreme leader are more or less going to be what we would consider hardliners. So I'm not sure there'll be much change there. And I think the other key figure that is very much, I think, in control of the operations is Mr. Larijani, who runs the National Security Council.
There are high hopes among people within Iran, as far as I know, certainly Canadians with Iranian connections, that there will be significant regime change as a result of what's going on right now. How likely do you think that is?
Well, I think it takes more than removing the leader for regime change. This can't be done just by aerial bombardment and assassinating some leaders. And, the West's record this century of using military intervention for regime change is almost zero. If you think about it, you have Libya, Afghanistan, some would argue Iraq, and even Venezuela, which hasn't really seen regime change. So this takes more than aerial bombardment. This is going to take engagement on the ground and a game plan, which, frankly, I haven't seen yet.
So when you hear the Trump administration say, okay, now it's in the hands of you, the Iranian people, to take action, how do you respond to that?
Well, I worry about that. I think people in the region, many people remember the Kurds in Iraq decades ago when America invaded Iraq. The Iranian people themselves have been down this road before, where Western leaders have told them to come out into the streets and then they haven't been backed up. And I fear very much President Trump even today was saying, I promised you I would help and I fulfilled my pledge, as if it's now over. So I'm very worried. I think what needs to happen in the coming days are a few more things. One, how will the Iranian security and law and order forces respond? They have a choice to make now. Will they protect the regime, or will they protect the nation and side with the people and try and build a new country? Second is what do the Americans do? Regime change requires some engagement, some diplomacy on the ground to try and affect a positive scenario. And I'm not seeing evidence of that as of yet. So I think we have a lot of uncertainty right now and a lot of instability in the region, because as you know, countries in the region have borne the brunt of the retaliation by Iran over the last 2 days.
And speaking of retaliation, what are you expecting to see from Iran's proxy groups in the region?
Well, look, unlike those other cases in Libya and elsewhere, Iran has a tremendous capacity to retaliate, and the Gulf Arab states and Israel have seen that over the last 2 days. I know from people on the ground that there's been a lot of damage in civilian areas, particularly in the United Arab Emirates. I think we're going to see a lot more military action. And I think we have to remember that this is in some ways a challenge between missiles and air defenses. And Iran's missiles are not limitless, they will run out. But neither is the air defense of the Arab states and Israel limitless, and they are going to run out of supplies for air defense.
Just a few seconds left. Donald Trump has now suggested Iran's new leadership wants to negotiate. Do you think that's still an option?
Well, I fear that President Trump is going to try to arrive at one of his famous deals and say that the job is done. And I think that's just going to leave the Iranian people at the short end of this stick. So unless there's a plan, I think this is very much going to be seen as a unilateral gamble rather than a plan.
Arif Lalani, former Canadian ambassador to Jordan, Iraq, the UAE, and Afghanistan, thank you very much.
Thank you.
As Canadians watch this war unfold from afar, the lucky few who have reached loved ones in the region share their stories.
I was really worried, but they were happy. And I told them, that's not fair. We are worried sick here.
The emotional weight and the elation that followed. Next. For Canadians with loved ones in Iran pushing for regime change, each strike a potential step forward. But the silence that follows, frightening for so many people struggling to reach family in Tehran. Among those in that very situation, Kaveh Shahruz and Shah Parak Shajarizadeh, they each fled Iran due to fear of persecution, and they both still have family in the region. So thank you both for joining us tonight. And Shah Parak, let me start with you. You were a political prisoner. You sought asylum in Canada. Now you advocate for women's rights in Iran. How are you processing what's happened in your country?
It's really hard to explain. We've been this emotional roller coaster for the past past months and also the past few days. We are worried for our family members, for the people inside Iran. At the same time, some of the news that came out, we were excited and we are happy. Like many Iranians inside Iran, outside Iran, that finally the bloodthirsty dictator of Iran is gone and people may breathe. The world is a better place now without one of the most dangerous and evil person in the world. But at the same time, we are worried that it gets worse than this.
Yeah, quite understandable concern. Kaveh, you've dedicated much of your life to pushing for regime change, including through the organization you helped found, the Iranian Justice Collective. Do you think this is the moment that could lead to not just a leadership change, but a meaningful leadership change?
Good to be with you. I think it's probably the best chance we've had in 47 years. All the elements are now in place. The international community is paying attention. Iranian people have shown that they don't want this regime anymore. They're not interested in reforming it. They want to overthrow it. As Shah Parak said, the most evil man in that country is now dead. So I think the opportunity is certainly there. I hope that opportunity actually leads to better things and a democratic future for us.
Shah Parak, you have family in Iran, and I know it's been very difficult for people to get word out, but you have been able to reach them. What have they told you about the mood in the country?
The early hours of the strike, I could contact my family members, and I was really worried, but they were happy. And I told them that's not fair. We are both sick here, but they were happy. And they say that finally we got some answers, because the Iranian people did everything. We get along with the reformists. We participate in different elections. We wanted reform. It didn't happen. People came to streets at different times, but they were killed by their own government brutally. And the past few months, the news coming from Iran, it's just shocking, unbelievable. That's why they've been waiting for the war to like help us. And people inside Iran, they are happy. And even before the news of the Khamenei's death, they were out like celebrating, because they see it as an opportunity toward freedom and democracy. My family members and friends were happy, but since yesterday morning, since Saturday morning, I couldn't get in touch with them like many others. There's no way we can connect them right now.
Yeah, we have about 90 seconds left. Kaveh, what about you? Have you been able to be in touch with family back home?
I've tried, but unfortunately, I haven't been able to get through. Either the internet is cut or it's severely limited. But based on conversations I've had with them in the past, and based on reactions that I see online from those that can get online, I have no doubt that my family is very, very happy. I mean, I think they have fought for years for freedom, to no avail. The international community ignored them. And I know, as strange as that sounds, they were really hoping for an outside party to step in and, give them a chance at freedom. I don't think they're expecting soldiers from another country to show up. They're willing to do the hard work. They're courageous, like many, many Iranian people. But this finally gives them a chance to actually fight for their own freedom.
Yeah, but Kaveh, I assume it must be very intimidating, very difficult to step forward in this uncertainty with the regime still apparently in control to try to make change.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is a regime that has never shown any hesitation to spill blood. As we just saw, the entire international community saw how ruthless they are. And I'm sure that they will spill even more blood to hang on to power. But Iranians have been exemplary in their courage. They have, fought bravely because they know what they want and they know what they reject. They reject theocracy, they reject dictatorship, and they want a better life for themselves, for their children, and for the international community.
Kaveh Shahrooz and Shahparak Shahjarizadeh, thank you both very much for speaking with us.
Thank you.
Next, Canadian quilters show love to the Tumbler Ridge community.
I hope it just gives some comfort. I hope that they know that it is a hug.
Their handmade act of kindness, next in our moment. You're looking at two quilters in Kamloops, British Columbia, packing up a shipment for the people of Tumbler Ridge. It started when one shop posted a call-out prompting quilters across the country to jump in and help. Tonight, their act of kindness makes our moment.
Quilts are just a thing that represent warmth, and to me, they're a great big hug when you need it. The scale of this quilt drive, like any other, it's always so huge. It's Canada-wide. I hope it just gives some comfort. I hope that they know that it is a hug. It's just such a tragic event that really was so senseless and didn't need to happen. It may be a very small northern community, but there's parts everywhere through BC that are impacted, and we just want to be there for them. The quilt drive started really with Heather's Fabric Shop. She put me in touch with the lady who is organizing the distribution up in Tumbler Ridge. So what their goal is to have 2,700 quilts, one for every person in the community. There's so much love and care and attention and put into when a quilter is making it. When a cause like this comes by that we can donate, of course we're going to. That's what quilters do.
Stacey was talking about how what happened in Tumbler Ridge has had not just an impact on people across the province, but a direct impact on some people. And it was because of that. She knew somebody in Kamloops who had a connection that she got involved. They may end up with too many quilts, but they do have a plan with what to do with the extras. I'm Ian Hannamansing in Vancouver. I hope you can join me on CBC News Network weeknights at 7 Eastern. See you then. Good night.